The Louvre Palace is a former royal palace located on the right bank of the Seine in Paris, between the Tuileries Gardens and the Church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois. Originally a fortress built in the medieval period, it became a royal palace in the 14th century under Charles V and was used from time to time by the kings of France as the main Paris residence. Its present structure has evolved in stages since the 16th century. In 1793 part of the Louvre became a public museum, now the celebrated Musée du Louvre, which has expanded to occupy most of the building. Architecture. The present-day Louvre Palace is a vast complex of wings and pavilions on 4 main levels which, although it looks to be unified, is the result of many phases of building, modification, destruction and restoration. The palace is situated in the right bank of the river Seine between Rue de Rivoli to the north and the Quai François Mitterrand to the south. To the west is the Jardin des Tuileries and, to the east, the Rue de l'Amiral de Coligny, where its most architecturally famous facade, the Louvre colonnade, and the Place du Louvre are found. The complex occupies about 40 hectares and forms 2 main quadrilaterals which enclose 2 large courtyards. The Cour Carrée, completed under Napoleon I, and the larger Cour Napoléon with the Cour du Carrousel to its west, built under Napoleon III. The Cour Napoléon and Cour du Carrousel are separated by the street known as the Place du Carrousel. The Louvre complex may be divided into the Old Louvre, the medieval and Renaissance pavilions and wings surrounding the Cour Carrée, as well as the Grande Gallery extending west along the bank of the Seine, and the New Louvre, those 19th-century pavilions and wings extending along the north and south sides of the Cour Napoléon along with their extensions to the west, which were originally part of the Palais des Tuileries, burned during the Paris Commune in 1871. Some 51,615 square m in the palace complex are devoted to public exhibition floor space. The Old Louvre. The Old Louvre occupies the site of the 12th-century fortress of King Philip Augustus, also called the Louvre. Its foundations are viewable in the basement level as the medieval Louvre department. This structure was raised in 1546 by King Francis I in favor of a larger royal residence which was added by almost every subsequent French monarch. King Louis XIV, who resided at the Louvre until his departure for Versailles in 1678, completed the Cour Carrée, which was closed off on the city side by colonnade. The Old Louvre is a quadrilateral approximately 160 meters on a side consisting of 8 aisles which are articulated by 8 pavilions. Starting at the northwest corner and moving clockwise, the pavilions consist of the following: Pavillon de Beauvais, Pavillon de Marengarde, Northeast Pavilion, Central Pavilion, Southeast Pavilion, Pavillon des Arts, Pavillon du Roi, and Pavillon Sully. Between the Pavillon du Roi and the Pavillon Sully is the Isle Lescott, built between 1546 and 1551. It is the oldest part of the visible external elevations and was important in setting the mold for later French architectural classicism. Between the Pavillon Sully and the Pavillon de Beauvais is the Isle Le Mercier, built in 1639 by Louis XIII and Cardinal Richelieu. It is a symmetrical extension of Lescott's wing in the same Renaissance style. With it, the last external vestiges of the medieval Louvre were demolished. The New Louvre. The New Louvre is the name often given to the wings and pavilions extending the palace for about 500 meters westwards on the north and on the south sides of the Cour Napoléon and Cour du Carrousel. It was Napoleon III who finally connected the north end of the Tuileries Palace with the Louvre in the 1850s, thus finally achieving the grand design originally envisaged by King Henry IV of France. France in the 16th century. This consummation only lasted a few years, however, as the Tuileries was burned in 1871 and finally razed in 1883. The northern limb of the new Louvre consists of three great pavilions along the Rue de Rivoli: the Pavillon de la Bibliothèque, Pavillon de Rouen and Pavillon de Marsan. On the inside of the Pavillon de la Bibliothèque are three pavilions: Pavillon Colbert, Pavillon Richelieu and Pavillon Turgot. These pavilions and the wings define three subsidiary courts, from east to west: Cour Corsabad, Cour Puget and Cour Marly. The southern limb of the new Louvre consists of five great pavilions along the Quai François Mitterrand: the Pavillon de la Lesdiguières, Pavillon des Sessions, Pavillon de la Tremble, Pavillon des Etats and Pavillon de Flore. As on the north side, three inside pavilions and the wings define three more subsidiary courts: Cour du Sphinx, Cour Vacanti and Cour La Foule. For simplicity, on museum tourist maps, the new Louvre North Limb, the new Louvre South Limb, and the Old Louvre are designated as the Richelieu Wing, the Benh Wing, and the Sully Wing, respectively. This allows the casual visitor to avoid becoming totally mystified at the bewildering array of named wings and pavilions. The Pavillon de Flore and the Pavillon de Marsan, at the westernmost extremity of the palace, were destroyed when the Third Republic razed the ruined Tuileries, but were subsequently restored beginning in 1874. The floor then served as the model for the renovation of the Marsan by architect Gaston Redon, a vast underground complex of offices, shops, exhibition spaces, storage areas, and parking areas, as well as an auditorium, a tourist bus depot, and a cafeteria, was constructed underneath the Louvre's central courtyards of the Cour Napoléon and the Cour du Carrousel for François Mitterrand's Grand Louvre project. The ground-level entrance to this complex was situated in the center of the Cour Napoléon and is crowned by the prominent steel and glass pyramid, designed by the Chinese-American architect I.M. Pei. Chronological plan of the construction of the Louvre. The oldest part of the above-ground Louvre is the southwest corner of the square block that faces the center of Paris to the east. This corner section, consisting of the Lescott wing and the north side of the western part of the south wing, was designed and constructed in the 16th century by Pierre Lescott, who replaced the corresponding wings of the medieval Louvre. Later that century, the Petite Gallery was added, connecting the Louvre to the section of the wall of Charles V which ran along the north bank of the Seine toward the Tuileries Palace. Around 1600, during the reign of Henry IV, the wall along the river was replaced with the Grande Gallery, which provided a covered passage from the Louvre to Tuileries Palace and later was the first part of the Louvre to become a museum. The Lescott wing was extended north with the Le Mercier wing under Louis XIII, and in the second half of the 17th century, during the reign of Louis XIV, the Petite Gallery was enlarged and the remaining wings around the square court were constructed, but not totally completed until the first part of the 19th century under Napoleon, who also added the Arc du Carrousel and parts of the north wing along the Rue de Rivoli. Later in the 19th century, the north wing was slightly extended by Louis XVIII. From 1852 to 1857, Napoleon III connected the north wing to the buildings surrounding the square court with the Richelieu wing and enlarged the Grande Gallery with the Denon wing. In 1861 to 1870, his architect Hector Lafeuille carried out further work, replacing the Pavillon de Flore and the western section of the Grande Gallery and adding the Pavillon des Sessions. In 1874 to 1880 he replaced the Pavillon de Marsan and extended the south facade of the adjacent Marsan wing. Plan of Louvre Tuileries by stage of construction history. Origin of its name. The origin of the name Louvre is unclear. The French historian Henry Sauval, probably writing in the 1660s, stated that he had seen in an old Latin Saxon glossary, Loire is translated castle, and thus took Loire to be the origin of Louvre. According to Keith Briggs, Sauval's theory is often repeated, even in recent books, but this glossary has never been seen again, and Sauval's idea is obsolete. Briggs suggests that H. J. Wolff's proposal in 1969 that Louvre derives instead from Latin rubres, meaning red soil, is more plausible. David Hanser, on the other hand, reports that the word may come from French louveterie, a place where dogs were trained to chase wolves. 12th–15th centuries medieval period. Fortress in 1190. King Philip II Augustus, who was about to leave on the Third Crusade, ordered the construction of a defensive enclosure all around Paris, to protect the city against potential invaders from the northwest. He decided to build an especially solid fortress just outside one of the wall's most vulnerable points, the junction with the river Seine on the right bank. Completed in 1202, the new fortress was situated in what is now the southwest quadrant of the Cour Carrée. The original Louvre was nearly square in plan and enclosed by a 2.6-metre thick crenellated and machicolated curtain wall. The entire structure was surrounded by a water-filled moat. Attached to the outside of the walls were 10 round defensive towers, one at each corner and the centers of the north and west walls, and 2 pairs flanking the narrow gates in the south and east walls. In the courtyard, slightly offset to the northeast, there was a cylindrical keep, which was 30 meters high and 15 meters in diameter with walls 4 meters thick. The keep was encircled by a deep, dry moat with stone counterscarps to help prevent the scaling of its walls with ladders. Accommodations in the fortress were supplied by the vaulted chambers of the keep as well as 2 wings built against the insides of the curtain walls. Of the west and south sides, the castle was a fortress, but not yet a royal residence. The monarch's Parisian home at the time was the Palais de la Cité. The circular plans of the towers and the keep avoided the dead angles created by square or rectangular designs which allowed attackers to approach out of firing range. Cylindrical keeps were typical of French castles at the time, but few were the size of the Louvre's. It became a symbol of the power of the monarchy and was mentioned in the oath of allegiance to the king, even up to the end of the ancient regime, long after the Grosse Tour was demolished in 1528. The Louvre was renovated frequently through the Middle Ages. Under Louis IX in the mid-13th century, the Louvre became the home of the Royal Treasury. Under the Valois dynasty, it housed a prison and courtrooms. Royal residence. The growth of the city and the advent of the 100 Years' War led Etienne Marcel, provost of the merchants of Paris, to construct an earthen rampart outside the wall of Philip. The new wall was continued and enhanced under Charles V. Remnants of the wall of Charles V can be viewed in the present-day Louvre's Galerie du Carrousel. From its westernmost point at the Tour du Bois, the new wall extended east along the north bank of the Seine to the old wall, enclosing the Louvre and greatly reducing its military value. After a humiliation suffered by Charles at the Palais de la Cité, he resolved to abandon it and make the Louvre into a royal residence. The transformation from a fortress to a palace took place from 1360 to 1380. The curtain wall was pierced with windows. New wings were added to the courtyard, and elaborate chimneys, turrets, and pinnacles to the top. Known as the Joli Louvre, Charles V's pleasure palace can be seen in the illustration The Month of October from the Duc du Berry's Très Richelieu's 16th century Renaissance period. In 1528, after returning from his captivity in Spain, Francis I ordered the demolition of the keep. At the Palace of Fontainebleau, Francis acquired what would become the nucleus of the Louvre's holdings. His acquisitions included Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. In 1546 he commissioned the architect Pierre Lescott and sculptor Jean Goujon to modernize the Louvre into a Renaissance-style palace. Lescott had previously worked on the Chateau of the Loire Valley and was adopted as the project architect. The death of Francis I in 1547 interrupted the work, but it was continued under Henry II beginning in 1549. Lescott demolished the west wing of the Old Louvre and rebuilt it, added a ceiling to Henry II's bedroom that departed from the traditional beamed style, and installed the Salle des Caryatides, which featured sculpted caryatides based on Greek and Roman works. Art historian Anthony Blunt refers to Lescott's work as a form of French classicism, having its own principles and its own harmony. During the reigns of François II and Charles IX, Lescott demolished the south wing of the Old Louvre and replaced it with a duplication of the Lescott wing. The intention was presumably to create a four-sided chateau the same size as the Old Louvre and similar to the Château d'Écouen, with an identical third wing to the north and a lower entrance wing on the east. Lescott also designed the Petite Gallery, which ran from the southwest corner of the Louvre to the Seine. However, all work stopped in the late 1560s because of the wars of religion. In the meantime, beginning in 1564, Catherine de' Medici directed the building of a chateau to the west, outside the wall of Charles V. It became known as the Palais des Tuileries because it was built on the site of an old tile factory. Architect Philibert Delorme began the project, and was replaced after his death in 1570 by Jean Bolland. The Bourbons took control of France in 1589. During his reign, Henry IV began his grand design to remove remnants of the medieval fortress, to increase the Cour Carré's area, and to create a link between the Palais des Tuileries and the Louvre. The link was completed via the Grande Gallery by architects Jacques Androuet du Cerceau and Louis Métiseux, more than a quarter of a mile long and 100 feet wide. This huge addition was built along the bank of the Seine. At the time of its completion it was the longest building of its kind in the world. Henry IV, a promoter of the arts, invited hundreds of artists and craftsmen to live and work on the building's lower floors. 17th–18th centuries. In the early 17th century, Louis XIII began the doubling of the length of the Lescott wing to the north. His architect, Jacques Le Mercier, designed and completed the wing by c. 1642. His central pavilion subsequently became known as the Pavillon de Horloge, after a clock was added in 1857. Le Mercier also began construction of the first part of the north wing heading east. In 1659, Louis XIV instigated a phase of construction under architect Louis Lavaux and painter Charles Lebrun. Lavaux oversaw the remodeling and completion of the Tuileries Palace, and at the Louvre the completion of the carcass of the north wing, the doubling of the length of the south wing, the decoration of the Pavillon du Roi, the creation of the Grand Cabinet du Roi, and a chapel. Lebrun decorated the Galerie d'Apollon. The landscape architect André Lenotre redesigned the Tuileries Garden in the French style, which had been created in 1564 by Catherine de' Medici in the Italian style. The Cabinet du Roi consisted of 7 rooms west of the Galerie d'Apollon on the upper floor of the remodeled Petite Gallery. Many of the king's paintings were placed in these rooms in 1673, when it became an art gallery, accessible to certain art lovers as a kind of museum. In 1681, after the court moved to Versailles, 26 of the paintings were transferred there, somewhat diminishing the collection, but it is mentioned in Paris guidebooks from 1684 on, and was shown to ambassadors from Siam in 1686. Commissioned by Louis XIV, a committee of architects, the Petit Conseil, comprising Lavaux, Lebrun and Claude Perrault, designed the east facade of the Louvre. It was begun in 1668 and completed c. 1680, during the reign of Louis XIV, but the wing behind it was not finished until the 19th century with the advent of Napoleon. The definitive design is attributed to Perrault, who made the final alterations needed to accommodate a decision to double the width of the south wing. The east facade is crowned by an uncompromising Italian balustrade along its distinctly non-French flat roof. It was a groundbreaking departure in French architecture. The severe design was chosen over a design provided by the great Italian architect Bernini, who had journeyed to Paris specifically to work on the Louvre. Perrault had translated the Roman architect Vitruvius into French. Now Perrault's rhythmical paired columns form a shadowed colonnade with a central pedimented triumphal arch entrance raised on a high, rather defensive base, in a restrained classicizing Baroque manner that has provided models for grand edifices in Europe and America for centuries. The Metropolitan Museum in New York, for one example, reflects Perrault's Louvre design. Perrault was also responsible for the doubling of the width of the south wing, covering Lavaux's original south facade, and designing a new south facade more compatible with the east facade. He also designed the north wing's city-side facade, and is thought to have been responsible for the design of the north, east, and south facades of the Cour Carrée. 19th century. In 1806, the construction of the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel began, situated between the two western wings, commissioned by Emperor Napoleon I to commemorate his military victories, designed by architect Charles Passia, surmounted by a quadriga sculpted by François-Joseph Bossiot, and completed in 1808. In the mid-19th centuries, old houses still encroached on the Place du Carrousel during the Second Empire. These old houses were swept clear of the Place du Carrousel. The huge complex of the Louvre Tuileries, whose master plan had been envisioned 3 centuries earlier, was finally completed by the construction of the Richelieu Wing and Denon Wing to the south. These new wings of 1852 to 1857, by architects Louis Visconti and Hector Lafeuille, represent the Second Empire's version of neo-Baroque, full of detail. The extensive sculptural program includes multiple pediments and a series of 86 statues of famous men, each one labeled. These include historian Philippe de Comines, by Eugène-Louis Lecain; naturalist Georges-Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, by Eugène-André Audrey; chemist Antoine Lavoisier, by Jacques-Léonard Maillet; historian Jacques-Auguste Thou, by Louis-Auguste Legan; philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, by Jean-Baptiste Frochon; Marquis de Vauban, by Gustave Krug. In May 1871, during the suppression of the Paris Commune, the Tuileries Palace was set on fire by the Communists. The palace was entirely destroyed, with the exception of Pavilion de Flore. A Richelieu library of the Louvre was destroyed in the fire, but the rest of the museum was saved by the efforts of firemen and museum curators. The western end of the Louvre courtyard has remained open since, forming the cordon bleu. Continued expansion and embellishment of the Louvre continued through 1876. In 1888, a monument to Elia Couto and Gambetta was erected in the center of the Cour Napoléon, where the pyramid stands today, which was then filled by 2 gardens, one of which contained a statue of Lafayette. These squares and statues were removed in 1954 to clear the view of the Pavillon de Horloge. 20th century, Grand Louvre and the Pyramids. In 1983, French President François Mitterrand proposed the Grand Louvre plan to renovate the building and move the finance ministry out of the Richelieu Wing, allowing displays throughout the building. American architect I.M. Pei was awarded the project and proposed a modernist glass pyramid for the central courtyard. The pyramid and its underground lobby were inaugurated on 15th of October 1988. Controversial at first, it has become an accepted Parisian architectural landmark. The second phase of the Grand Louvre plan, Le Pyramide in Versailles, was completed in 1993. As of 2002, attendance had doubled since completion. As part of the Grand Louvre project, the Louvre Palace was divided into 3 geographical zones, named for the pavilions through which they are entered from the reception area under the pyramid in the Cour Napoléon, the Sully Wing to the east, the Richelieu Wing to the north, and the Denon Wing to the south. 21st century. Since 2003, the Comité National pour la Reconstruction des Tuileries has been proposing to rebuild the Tuileries Palace. Since the destruction of 1883, the famous perspective of the Champs-Élysées, which ended on the facade of the Tuileries Palace, now ends at the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel, formerly centered on the Tuileries but now occupying a large empty space. The Louvre, with its pyramid on the one hand, and the axe historique of the Place de la Concorde Champs-Élysées Arc de Triomphe on the other, are not aligned on the same axis. The Palace of the Tuileries, which was located at the junction of these two diverging axes, helped to disguise this bending of the axes. Also, it is emphasized that the Musée du Louvre needs to expand its ground plan to properly display all its collections. And if the Tuileries Palace were rebuilt, the Louvre could expand into the rebuilt palace. It's also proposed to rebuild the state apartments of the Second Empire as they stood in 1871, as all the furniture and paintings from the palace survived the 1871 fire because they had been removed in 1870 at the start of the Franco-Prussian War and stored in secure locations. Today, the furniture and paintings are still deposited in storehouses and are not on public display due to the lack of space in the Louvre. It is argued that recreating the state apartments of the Tuileries would allow the display of these treasures of the Second Empire style which are currently hidden. Photo gallery.